Well, as usual, I took my sweet time in getting around to getting my bulbs in. So that is what I've been doing this week. Planning the bulbs, planning the beds, getting the containers ready. I still have daffodils, tulips, alliums, hyacinths. Oh my goodness, all sorts of things that have not gone in at all. But I usually am pretty late in putting in my bulbs, so this is nothing new for me. Probably have over 1,000 tulip bulbs to put in, and that doesn't even count what I've got in the daffodil. Now, I'm pretty disappointed in one thing. The greenhouse is not heated yet, so it stays pretty cool in here. So that's where I've been storing the bulbs. But little did I know when I was storing the bulbs in here that it was going to go down to 3 degrees for about 4 days, and it actually did affect many of my bulbs. I think got frozen. Because these daffodils, some of these daffodil bulbs, instead of being nice and hard, just what they should be, they have gotten kind of soft and a little bit, not mushy, but soft. Now it looks like it still has life in it, but I don't know. I don't know if a lot of these are ruined. I'm going to plant them anyway, but if I got to lose, if nothing else, they'll just turn into mulch. And I mean, they'll just turn into compost under the ground. But I think maybe even half of these beautiful little minnow narcissus, I think at least half of these froze, and they may not be worth a thing. But we'll find out. I'm also a little bit disappointed because that also happened to these bluebells. Now, fortunately, none of the tulips froze. But I couldn't believe it got that cold in here. I mean, even though it's unheated, it should not have gotten to that temperature in here. Well, we'll be taking care of that in the future. After all, it is a new greenhouse, and I'm not really used to it yet. So I'm going to make a plan for these. I'm going to pop them in here, there, and everywhere, and I will show you what I'm doing. Let's start out with some tea. We haven't done that in a while. We will be having special teas real soon, once again. This is a wonderful William Morris design from one of these tapestries. It's the woodpecker tapestry. You can just barely see the woodpecker. This is a pretty small mug, and it says, "I once a king and chief, now am the tree bark's thief." So I guess that's the motto of this woodpecker. And this is fine bone china made in England. And I'm going to try this tea that my friend sent me. Numi herbal chocolate rooibos, which is we've done real rooibos tea before. We'll give this another try. Sweet rooibos and real cocoa. Because it's herbal, we'll have to let that steep for quite some time. What I like to do is make a basic drawing of my garden space. So this would be my garden bones, and they never change. So I don't fill any of the plants in unless they're permanent plants, such as here's a little plum tree and 2 blueberry bushes. They're not going anywhere, nor are the paths. So we have stone paths, brick paths, and gravel paths. But we also have all these empty garden beds that I need to fill in. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12, if you count this planter that always has something different in it. 12 garden beds of different sizes that need to be filled in. Some of the things here are permanent. There are 5 roses in this particular bed, but I can plant things around it as well. Then we have little trees and a couple little blueberry bushes here, and climbing roses growing along the fence line. But this is my basic layout, and as I said, it never changes. So make copies of it. And then when I make the copies of it, then I can begin to fill it in with the plants and where I want to put them. I don't know about you, but I am definitely a list keeper. I keep lists especially for things that go into the garden. The bulbs, the roots, and the seeds, where I purchased them, price comparisons of what I paid for each grouping, and then I can find out as I go back through the season and see how everyone performed if somebody was sluggish, if somebody sent soft bulbs, or they just were not up to par, or they were too small. I will know how that company deals with problems, and I will also know whether or not I want to order from them again. I've always had pretty good luck with all of these companies. Oh, how many? I know how tall they're going to be. Is it mid-spring? Mid-spring? Is it mid to late spring? That way I can calculate where I want to plant them. Now, you can just be, free and easy and just throw them in wherever you want. But because I have so many, I really have the opportunity to make something pretty artistic here in the greenhouse garden. And that's what I'm going to do. So here we have, as I said, all the paths. This is the greenhouse right here. This is my porch. And I have all these beautiful spaces to fill in. Multiple copies of your garden plan is really helpful from season to season. So here we have the plans that I've made for the spring bulbs. Everything's written in here. I pretty much decided where I want to put these in the potager. I've marked whether or not it's a perennial bulb or a daffodil, because I won't want to disturb those when next year comes along and there's nothing above ground to show me what's there underneath. I will know by referring to my little map here. If you're working on colors, you can just work out some colored pencil or some little watercolor splotches just to see what colors you want to put where. It's just really helpful to have these, because then you can keep them from season to season, and then when I'm ready to plant for summer, I have another blank slate and I can decide what to put on top of those bulbs when it comes to seeds and perennials and bedding plants. So before we get outside and do some actual planting, let's talk a little bit about bulbs. They come in all shapes. And all sizes. Crocus bulbs, tiny allium bulbs, hyacinth. These are just the small hyacinth. This is Camassia. Little mountain lily bulbs. Look at the shape of those. These fritillaria bulbs are really rather odd. She's got the tulip bulbs, the daffodil bulbs, and we have some larger hyacinth bulbs. These are the perfumed hyacinths that are so marvelous. You're hearing a humming noise in here, and that's because I turned on a little ceramic heater here in the greenhouse. So I hope that isn't too disruptive. But no matter what size bulb you've got, from the tiniest bulb to some of the largest bulbs, they all have something in common. So inside this little compartment here is basically an underground storage structure. It's got all the nutrients it needs to survive its entire life cycle. Everything that it needs is inside this little compartment. So the parts of the bulb are this tissuey substance right here is called the tunic, and that's just to protect the bulb. And then you've got the basal plate right here. And then you've got the roots coming out from around inside the basal plate in each one of these different sorts of bulbs. And then inside, in the very center, you've got the actual plant. But surrounding that plant are little fleshy parts, little storage tissues. And those are the little parts that you really can't see right now unless you have a little naked bulb like this one, which is perfectly fine to put this in the ground as well. It'll be just fine. So as the bulbs are put into the ground, and when the time is right, they will develop roots on the bottom, just as every plant, and begin to grow from the center of the bulb up through the ground. You can see right here is where that was planted in the ground. It doesn't start to turn green until it hits the surface. And the way you plant bulbs is according to the size of the bulb. So a little bulb like this, you basically think, okay, 2 times that depth is what I will plant that bulb. 2 times that depth. So these little ones, they don't go very deep in the ground. But once you start getting to larger bulbs, such as daffodils, daffodils actually should go at least 6 to 8 inches deep. And tulip bulbs are generally 4 to 6 inches deep. Now these are known as true bulbs. When you get into things like roots and corms and rhizomes, those are not true bulbs, but they are bulbs, but they're not true bulbs. So this little guy here, I'm not sure if this would be considered a corm or a bulb, but this is a fritillaria. Looks like a dried old crusty rock, but it's actually fine. It's going to go in the ground and grow into some beautiful little plants. Now, bulbs don't necessarily have to go into the ground. They can also be grown in a pot, in a windowsill, by sitting in a little glass bulb container, or such as this little pewter bowl full of stone and a little bit of water, just so that the bulb is sitting just touching on the bottom of the water so that it can grow its roots. And these hyacinths will grow just beautifully right here, and they will be blooming earlier than the things in the garden, because basically we're forcing these bulbs into thinking that it's springtime. Because these are placed in the house where it's a little bit warmer, and then you can get some early bloom color. This can be done with paper whites, crocuses, narcissus, all sorts of other plants, but I basically just do it with these hyacinth. Another great thing about bulbs is they reproduce underground, especially if you're getting daffodils, which will naturalize an area. And some of what I'm planting in this garden will be naturalizing daffodils, but you can see that this one has already reproduced. It's got a little baby. I could probably tug that off, but I don't think I'll do that just yet. And that could be planted separately. And every year that will get bigger and bigger until it's about the size of this one. Now, tulips also reproduce by producing little bulblets. They're just not quite as impressive, and they don't really do as well as daffodils. Planting your bulbs, you can plant them in a very natural looking way by planting them all together, say in a little wildlife or woodland garden, and that's a very beautiful way to plant them. Or you can just plant them in mass as one particular color or color block, and that is pretty impressive and very dramatic. Looks like the potager is going to have to be off limits for Godfrey in the future, since he's decided that my tulip baskets are a perfect place to play. Problems with animals in your garden, whether it's rabbits or chipmunks or squirrels or cats who like to use your beds as a litter box, or chickens who get in your garden and just try to annihilate everything, or little puppies and big puppies like that. This is invaluable to me. This is just inexpensive garden fencing. Don't use it for fencing. I use it to protect my beds. And I just lay it down and attach it in the ground with some kind of metal posts or whatever I happen to have. In this case, I have these little cast iron fencing pieces that I bought probably 20 years ago, and I move them around all the time. They're so useful. But it keeps it in place. It keeps the animals from being able to dig in here. It's pretty much invisible. You can even cover this with a layer of compost or peat, and it won't even show. So these seedlings, in this case there are tulips and daffodils in here, they're able to come through these spaces because they're a decent size. And actually once the garden is established, you can lift these up if you're not too worried about any further damage in the garden. Most of my damage happens just when I'm planting things. And this guy is really going to be a problem. I can see it now. Aren't you, Godfrey? You're awful cute, but boy, are you a stinker. These are a lot of bulbs that I just had to move from one location to another. They're from last year, and don't recognize all of them, but I don't let any of these go to waste. I just pop them in a pot or in another garden bed. Look at this beautiful daffodil. I had to pull this up to move it to another bed. Look at the roots on that. It's very gorgeous. And this one even comes with 2 worms. I love daffodils, narcissus, because the bulbs just get bigger every year. Whereas with tulips, they actually get smaller every year. A concrete bed about 3.5 feet long. And on the very bottom I put the deep purple tulips. I think they're called Purple Rain. And then I'm planting on the top, I'm doing 100 little fritillarias, because I just love this little checkerboard fritillaria here, and some blue muscari. the muscari will keep spreading and spreading. The reason I'm putting the fritillaria here is because I want to see it. I don't want it hidden somewhere in the woodland garden. I'm putting it there too, but I want to be able to look at it when it grows because I think it's just the prettiest little spring flower. So we'll see what this lasagna mixture turns out to be. I have no idea. I'm doing some drumstick allium. I believe I told you something wrong. Because on this packet, there's these tiny little bulbs. It says to plant them 3 to 5 inches deep. So that's way deeper than what I said. I said twice as deep as the bulb. So we'll just follow their directions instead of mine. Just be sure you read your packages. These drumstick allium grow to be about 22 to 28 inches tall, and they're this beautiful 1 inch. They're about 1 inch heads, which are a deep maroon, and they bloom usually in midsummer, and they're just gorgeous to have, and they will come back year after year. Well, rosemary bushes were killed by that frost. I'm just about certain they're dead because these are evergreens. There's not one bit of green on them, even when I scratch the stems and down there at the very bottom. And this plant was so gorgeous and so prolific and so tall. I think it was about 5 years old, this one as well. So I'm not holding out much hope for these to be alive. Rosemary doesn't like those kind of temperatures. So this is one of the garden beds that was full of strawberries. I am digging up all the strawberries out of this bed, even though they've been pretty prolific. I want to get the strawberries up off the ground because I have a terrible problem with slugs. No matter what I do, the slugs get so many of the strawberries, way many more than we get. So I'm going to bring them up off the ground, and I'm going to try them in a different way. And the same thing with this bed here. So I have dug up, I put about 23 strawberry plants that I dug up from there. They're underneath the leaf mulch here. I put them in this wheelbarrow along with purple tulips and drumstick allium. This flower bed right here, it's really given me a lot of extra space because it was just full of strawberries and nothing else. But now that the strawberries are pulled up, I'm putting them in these more shallow clay pots. They're not really shallow enough though, because strawberries don't have much of a root system. They don't grow very deep, and so I don't want to waste a whole lot of soil. So I fill the bottoms about halfway up with debris, organic debris, old leaves. These are just leaves from the liriope that I trim. And then I can not waste so much soil, but I've really gotten so many strawberries. They don't look like much right now because they've been trampled on and they've been frozen and all sorts of things have happened to them. So they look pretty pathetic at this point. But I have no doubt that they will revive and probably be a lot more productive for us in these pots than they have been in the ground, where the slugs just get most of them. Now I took this gutter that I had for the greenhouse, poked some holes in it along the edge, put it on this tiny shelf. There wasn't much I could get on this really slender little shelf in front of the window, but this works. And this is where I put about 23 strawberry plants that have beautiful full sun all day and drainage holes, and they'll look beautiful growing in front of this window. And if I didn't want strawberries in here, this would be great for pansies or nasturtiums, just falling over the sides. Be great, absolutely great. I want to build up the height of this particular bed, and I just don't have enough garden soil to go all the way to the top. So I'm layering it with leaves on the bottom, some homemade compost on top of that, and then some of my finer soil that I've put together. And I don't know yet what I'm going to do with this bed, but I think I'm going to sprinkle some poppy seeds in here and cornflowers today. Now for my second layer here, I'm going to use our homemade compost, which is actually from the donkeys. And I don't have a compost bin, I have a compost pile. So whenever we clean the barn, we just take it and we dump it in a mountain, sort of. It becomes a mountain eventually, underneath a tree down here. And we just let the rain and the sun beat down on it and do whatever it has to do. And the chickens get in there and they dig in it and they mix it around. So I don't have to. And anyway, within 4 to 6 months, I've got some pretty decent compost. The only thing I have to watch out for are any grass roots or hay roots that might be in here, because I sure don't want those in the garden. But I guess this is the lazy person's way to do compost, because I sure don't want to be in there turning compost heaps and that sort of thing. There's too many other things that need to be done. So for now, I could just leave this as is, because I'm not sure what I'm going to put in here. Most likely, I'm feeling like I'm going to start out by putting in some poppy seeds, because this is a good time to do it right now in January when it's still cold. And cornflowers too. Well, the weather has tampered with my final plans to get everything put in today, because it's not that it's a blizzard out here, but the ground is pretty mushy and I don't really want to work in that kind of soil. So I will go ahead and plant some of the bulbs in pots. So for those of you who are still hanging on to some bags of bulbs and you don't know if you can still plant them in your weather, if your ground isn't frozen, you can go ahead and plant them. If your ground is frozen, get some pots and plant your bulbs in pots. And that's what we'll do right now. Okay, so we've got this copper kettle, which is a perfect candidate for bulbs. So I've already filled this with styrofoam chunks from packing materials. I'm going to push those down a little bit, put a piece of landscape fabric on top of that, and then start filling it with my soil mixture. Okay, put the landscaping fabric on top of that styrofoam just to separate it from the soil. No, you can't eat those tulip bulbs. I believe I called this a copper kettle, but it's actually a copper boiler. Quite a difference. So I'm putting my nice soil in here. And my mixture usually would have perlite in it, but I couldn't find any perlite in the store. Weird. So mine is a mixture of compost and peat. When you are planting in a container, you really want to pack those bulbs in there. That's what gives you the best presentation. And of course, you could also put many other bulbs in here besides the tulips. But because these have about 4 different kinds of tulips in them, this particular blend, it's got purple and maroon and orange. I just don't think it would need any more variety of bulbs in here, because that would be overkill. The tulips in and of themselves in this mix are really going to be enough. And I'm putting them pretty close together. I'm going to cover them with as much soil as I can get in here. I hope I have about 6 inches. What you need is 4 to 6 inches. I think I might have maybe too many tulips right now, which just means I have more tulips to put somewhere else. Yep, that'll give me about 20 more to put in another garden or another pot. More soil. Okay. We have another great planting receptacle, and this is just the horse trough that I've used so many times for so many different plants. I moved it up against the back of the house. I put this old bed headboard behind it because I'm going to put sweet peas in here as well. So I'm going to put tulips here in the bottom, and it is just right outside the gate to the greenhouse. This is called Zinfandel, and it's a blend of pastel colors from mid to late spring. And these should grow to be 18 to 24 inches tall. Oh, that's pretty tall for these. Wow. Spacing 3 to 6 inches apart. There's 100 bulbs. Now, the history of tulips is really quite interesting. In fact, during the 17th century, people became really enamored of tulips. The first tulip bulbs were imported from Turkey to plant in the imperial gardens of Emperor Ferdinand of Vienna. And there, the royal botanists have been feverishly working to breed these tulips into different exciting new plants. Took them to Holland to show them at the Botanical Gardens in 1593, where they made their debut. The debuted flowers were so coveted by the public that all 600 bulbs were stolen, all in one night. Isn't that something? After the theft of those tulip bulbs, the passion for the tulips actually increased to a great degree, to the point where in 1673, 3 Rembrandt tulip bulbs were sold for the equivalent in today's money of $25,000. So tulip mania is what it was called. Tulip mania really was severe. People ardently loved the tulips. And we still do to this day. They're just such a beautiful plant. Last year I didn't put any in. I actually used my planters to put in new roses. I'm really glad I did. I love those roses, but I really missed the tulips when springtime came along. And I didn't have any gorgeous tulips to look at except for those that had come back from the previous years. And so that's why here I am again, planting tulips. I suppose I always will. My father's family was Dutch, and I don't know, maybe that has something to do with my love for tulips. I doubt it, because I think we all love tulips. But I think I will always plant them. And this is going to be a pretty nice showing. Back here in the back, I'm going to put some peas. Believe it or not, I'm going to do it in the next couple days, but I'm going to cover the peas with my little glass jars. And we'll see how they do here by being planted in the very early month of January. I don't know. Last year I planted them in February. They did okay, but you know, my problem with peas is I never can seem to get them to the flowering stage. They always look great as they're growing, get great stems, great leaves, great tendrils, and hardly any blooms. So I am going to keep on working until I get those blooms. Just aren't enough hours in the day to finish this job. Either it's snowing, it's raining, it's freezing cold, or the days are just so short. But I did accomplish quite a bit, and I still have a lot more to do. But I don't want to bore you with all the details, so I will just let you know that I still have to do this strip to naturalize some daffodils. This section right here is pretty much a wild bulb garden where I just let any kind of bulb grow that wants to. So it's still got the strawberries in it, it's got climbing roses, and probably about 5 or 6 different varieties of little bulbs, little spring bulbs. I removed the dead rosemaries because they were. Filled this with let's see, bluebells, and also a perennial tulip called Darwin's Hybrid. It's called Plant to Impress. I moved 2 of the blueberry bushes in here. They are dwarf blueberries and a dwarf plum tree. All along this edge, I'm going to naturalize this with tulips, but it's also got 3 climbing roses and some little ground roses here and a lot of little bulbs. This needs work still. These twig tulip baskets, I made 3 of them. I use rebar whenever I do wattle fencing or woven fencing because it doesn't rot. I do have to replace the twigs every year, but that's okay, not a problem. We have plenty of those. And in those, Cabernet Sauvignon, white tulips here in the middle, another bunch of Cabernet Sauvignon. Along here, I put the minnow narcissus, which are only 6 to 8 inches tall. And along with that, we have a lot of little variations of bulbs, which are probably muscaries. These are some that I had to dig up from other gardens and really not quite sure what they are. But they're surrounding the baskets. This would be a poppy bed, most likely. I filled all these pots with the excess strawberries. Large basket are the minnow narcissus, no, the minnow quail narcissus, and those are a small daffodil. In here is a beautiful blood red tulip called Allison Bradley, and also some drumstick alliums and blue alliums in this pot. Pots we have blue hyacinth and white tulips. And right in front of them about some very, very tall daffodils in this strip, along with some more purple tulips. Wash stand here with called Easter Joy pastel tulips. And behind that is one of my climbing roses. And underneath this is a mess, which I'm still working on. More white tulips and some pink fragrant hyacinth with muscaris on top. And here we have more daffodils. And this is the strip that's going to be naturalized with daffs. So there's still a lot to do. But we will get back to it. But in the next video, I'm sure that we will probably be doing cooking a tea. The rooibos tea, the rooibos chocolate tea that we just had, I don't think I would buy this. It's just a little bit too mild for me, and I really can't taste the chocolate that much. But if you like herbal tea, and you like the taste, a faint taste of chocolate, this was just fine. So until next time, this is Jerry. Get out the greenhouse window. How fun to be in a greenhouse for a change. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.